I sat in that sterile courtroom as David's attorney finished destroying what remained of my reputation. 22 years of marriage reduced to vicious lies about my mental instability. Then my 15-year-old daughter Grace stood up, her voice steady as steel. "Judge Harrison, can I show you something that Mom doesn't know about?" My stomach dropped. What secrets had my own child been keeping? The judge nodded. Grace connected her phone to the courtroom's video system. The screen flickered to life, and within seconds, absolute silence filled the room. The video hadn't even started playing yet, but my mind was already racing backward through the wreckage of my life. How had I gotten here? 22 years ago, I thought I'd found my fairy tale ending when I met David Richardson at a Phoenix charity gala. I was 35, finally hitting my stride as a real estate agent, selling million-dollar homes in Scottsdale like they were candy. David was this confident corporate lawyer with silver-streaked hair and a smile that could charm anyone into signing anything. Our courtship was something out of a romance novel. He'd surprise me with weekend trips to Sedona, leave handwritten notes in my car, send flowers to my office for no reason other than it was Tuesday. When he proposed at the Grand Canyon, I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. We married 6 months later in a ceremony that cost more than most people's cars. The early years were everything I'd dreamed of. We bought a gorgeous 4,000-square-foot house in Scottsdale, with a pool that sparkled like diamonds and mountain views that took your breath away. David's law practice was thriving, handling corporate mergers and acquisitions for companies across the Southwest. I kept selling houses, building my reputation as one of the top agents in the valley. When Grace was born, I was 40 years old and over the moon. David seemed to transform into this devoted father, always carrying her around the house, reading her bedtime stories in different voices that made her giggle. Those first few years with Grace felt like we were living in a magazine spread about perfect families. But somewhere around year 10, subtle changes began creeping in, like termites eating away at the foundation. David's law firm started losing major clients to bigger practices in Phoenix and Los Angeles. The stress lines around his eyes deepened, and his charming smile appeared less frequently. He began staying late at the office more often, coming home with this tightness in his jaw that made conversation feel like walking through a minefield. I picked up the slack financially, without complaint. Real estate was booming, and I was pulling in commissions that more than covered our mortgage and Grace's private school tuition. David never directly acknowledged this shift, but I started noticing subtle comments about my little hobby job and how I was always running around showing houses to strangers. The emotional manipulation started so gradually that I barely recognized it at first. David would question decisions I'd been making successfully for decades. When I chose paint colors for a client's staging, he'd shake his head and say, "I'm just worried you're not thinking clearly lately." When I forgot to buy his preferred coffee brand, he'd look at me with this concerned expression and suggest maybe I should write more things down because my memory seemed to be slipping. He began criticizing my appearance in ways that felt caring on the surface. "Honey, are you sure that dress is flattering? I just want you to feel confident." Or, "Maybe we should think about updating your hairstyle. You want to stay competitive in real estate, right?" Each comment chipped away at my self-assurance until I found myself second-guessing choices I'd never questioned before. David's commentary on my mothering was even more devastating. He'd suggest that Grace seemed withdrawn after spending time with me, or wonder aloud if my work schedule was affecting our daughter's emotional development. When Grace struggled with algebra, David shook his head sadly and said, "Maybe if you spent less time at open houses and more time helping with homework." I started doubting myself constantly. Was I really becoming forgetful? Was my judgment slipping? Was I failing as a mother? The confidence that had built my career began crumbling, and I found myself apologizing for things that weren't mistakes, asking David's opinion on decisions I'd been making independently for years. Grace was witnessing all of this, though I thought I was protecting her by not arguing back or defending myself. I believed that maintaining peace in the house was more important than standing up for myself. What I didn't realize was that my daughter was absorbing every subtle put-down, every moment of manipulation, every instance where David made me question my own reality. The situation escalated dramatically 6 months ago when David announced he was filing for divorce. But this wasn't a mutual decision or even a heated argument that got out of hand. This was a calculated ambush. He'd hired Patricia Summers, the most aggressive divorce attorney in Scottsdale, known for her scorched earth tactics and her ability to paint wives as unstable gold diggers. Patricia had built a case against me that read like a psychological thriller. According to their narrative, I was a mentally unstable woman who had become increasingly erratic and unfit to parent Grace. They claimed I was financially irresponsible, emotionally volatile, and possibly dangerous. The documents painted a picture of a woman I didn't recognize, someone who was allegedly stealing from clients, neglecting her child, and having wild mood swings that required psychiatric intervention. Reading those court papers felt like being punched repeatedly in the stomach. Every insecurity David had planted over the years was now presented as legal fact. Every moment of self-doubt was twisted into evidence of my supposed mental illness. I couldn't understand how the man who'd once written love poems to me was now trying to destroy my life so completely. The worst part was that some days, I almost believed their version of events. David had been so consistent in his subtle undermining that I'd started to wonder if maybe I really was losing my grip on reality. Maybe I was becoming the unstable, incompetent woman he described. Maybe Grace really would be better off without me. But as Grace approached Judge Harrison's bench, something in her posture reminded me of myself at her age. Determined, unafraid, ready to fight for what was right. And I realized that whatever she was about to show this courtroom, my daughter had been planning this moment for longer than I could have imagined. Judge Harrison looked at Grace with the kind of patience that suggested he'd dealt with children in family court before. Grace whispered something to him, and his expression shifted from polite attention to sharp interest. He nodded slowly, then looked directly at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Mrs. Richardson," he said, "it appears your daughter has evidence relevant to these proceedings that you're unaware of. Given the serious nature of the allegations in this case, I'm going to allow her to present this information." My heart hammered against my ribs as Grace walked back to the courtroom's technology station. She moved with purpose, like she'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. David shifted in his seat, his confident expression faltering for just a moment. Patricia leaned over to whisper something urgent in his ear, but Grace was already connecting her phone to the projection system. The large screen at the front of the courtroom flickered to life, and I found myself holding my breath. Whatever my 15-year-old daughter was about to reveal, it was clear that this moment would change everything. The screen filled with a familiar scene that made my chest tighten. Our kitchen, 6 months ago, bathed in the warm afternoon light that always streamed through the west-facing windows. I watched myself moving around the island, preparing Grace's after-school snack, looking tired but normal. Then David walked into frame, and something cold settled in my stomach. "Lisa, we need to talk about the bank account." His voice rang clearly through the courtroom speakers. On screen, I looked up with the kind of instant tension that comes from months of walking on eggshells. "What about it?" my recorded voice asked, and I cringed at how defensive I sounded. "There's money missing again. Significant amounts. Are you sure you're not having more of those episodes where you can't remember what you've done?" I watched myself visibly deflate on screen. "David, I haven't had any episodes. I think you're confusing me with someone else's situation. Honey, denial is part of the problem. Dr. Walsh warned us about this. You're transferring money around and then forgetting about it. Look." David produced a bank statement and pointed at several withdrawal entries. $3,000 here, $1,500 there. "Do you remember making these transactions?" On screen, I studied the papers with growing confusion. "I don't remember these withdrawals, but that doesn't mean I didn't make them. Maybe I was paying bills, or maybe you're having more memory issues than you want to admit." "Lisa, this is exactly what Dr. Walsh said would happen. The stress of your condition is making you block out things that frighten you." The courtroom was dead silent, as everyone watched. David systematically convinced me that I was losing my mind. What struck me most was how concerned he sounded, how genuinely worried. If I hadn't been living through it, I might have believed he was a caring husband dealing with his wife's mental health crisis. The video cut to a different day, same kitchen. This time I was frantically searching through drawers and cabinets while David watched from the doorway. "Looking for something specific?" he asked mildly. "The property tax documents. They were right here on the counter this morning, and now they're gone. We need to file them today or we'll face penalties." "Lisa, you never brought any tax documents to the kitchen. Are you thinking of last week when you were organizing Grace's school papers?" "No, David. I specifically remember laying them right here next to the coffee maker because I wanted to review them over breakfast." "Sweetheart, you had yogurt and coffee for breakfast. You were reading a magazine, not tax documents. Are you feeling okay? Should I call Dr. Walsh? I watched my on-screen self begin to doubt her own memory. The confusion and fear in my eyes was painful to witness. Maybe I'm misremembering. I've been so scattered lately. It's not your fault. This is what happens with your condition. But we need to start keeping better track of important documents before something serious gets lost. The next clip showed David in Grace's bedroom, talking to our daughter while she did homework. My blood ran cold as I realized Grace must have been secretly recording this conversation. Grace, I need you to understand that Mommy is sick right now. Her brain isn't working the way it should, and sometimes she might do or say things that don't make sense. What kind of sick? Grace's young voice asked. It's called depression with anxiety features. Dr. Walsh says it can make people forget things, get confused about what's real, and sometimes act in ways that aren't safe. That's why Mommy has been taking special medicine. Is Mommy going to get better? We hope so, sweetheart. But if she doesn't, she might need to go somewhere where doctors can take better care of her. Somewhere away from home, just for a while. Like a hospital? Something like that. But remember, this is a grown-up problem, and you shouldn't worry about it. Just know that Daddy will always take care of you, no matter what happens with Mommy. I felt sick listening to David plant seeds of doubt about my mental state in our daughter's mind. Grace had been living with the fear that her mother might be taken away to some kind of institution, and she'd been carrying that burden alone for months. The video continued with scene after scene of David's psychological manipulation. He would move my car keys and then express concern when I couldn't find them. He would cancel appointments I'd made and tell me I must have forgotten to write them down. He would rearrange items in my office and suggest that my disorganization was getting worse. One particularly chilling clip showed David in our bathroom, switching the labels on my medication bottles. I watched him replace my actual prescriptions with different pills, then put everything back exactly as it had been. The methodical way he did it suggested this wasn't the first time. What you're seeing, David's attorney Patricia said, standing up, is a clear violation of privacy laws. This footage was obtained illegally without consent and should not be admissible. Judge Harrison held up his hand. Miss Summers, given that this involves potential child welfare issues and allegations of domestic manipulation, I'm going to allow the evidence to continue. The court needs to see the full picture before making custody determinations. The video shifted to show David on the phone in his home office, speaking to someone I couldn't see. The medication switch is working perfectly. She's been increasingly foggy and confused since we started. How much longer before you think we can safely increase the dosage? Give it another week, came a voice I recognized with shock. Dr. Raymond Walsh, my psychiatrist. We don't want to move too fast and create obvious symptoms. The goal is gradual decline that looks like natural progression of her condition. And you're sure the medical records will support our timeline if this goes to court? Absolutely. I've documented every visit to show escalating mental instability. Depression, anxiety, memory issues, possible early onset dementia. Combined with the financial irregularities you've created, no judge would award her custody. My hands began shaking as I realized the scope of the conspiracy against me. My own doctor, the man I'd trusted with my mental health, had been working with David to deliberately sabotage my well-being. The medications that were supposed to help me had actually been making me sick. The courtroom erupted in whispered conversations as people processed what they were hearing. Several spectators looked at David with undisguised disgust. Patricia was frantically taking notes, probably trying to figure out how to contain this damage. Grace's voice came through the speakers, explaining what viewers were seeing. I started recording these conversations when I noticed Mommy was getting sicker after seeing Dr. Walsh. She used to be so strong and confident, but she was becoming scared of everything, even her own thoughts. I knew something was wrong because Daddy would act differently when she wasn't around. The final clip in this section showed David methodically adding extra pills to my daily medication organizer, the one I used to keep track of my prescriptions. He was increasing the dosage without my knowledge, making me sicker while convincing everyone around us that I was mentally deteriorating. How long has this been going on? Judge Harrison asked Grace directly. Almost a year, Your Honor. At first, I thought Daddy was just worried about Mommy. But then I started noticing that he would do things to make her confused, and then act surprised when she couldn't remember things correctly. Judge Harrison turned his attention back to the screen, his expression grim. Continue with the video, young lady. The court needs to see everything. Grace nodded and reached for her second phone. "This is just part 1, Your Honor. The rest is much worse." As Grace prepared to play the next section of footage, I felt a strange combination of horror and relief. Horror at discovering the extent of David's betrayal, but relief at finally understanding that I wasn't losing my mind. Every moment of confusion, every instance of self-doubt, every time I'd questioned my own reality had been deliberately orchestrated. I looked at David across the courtroom, and for the first time in months, I felt anger instead of uncertainty. This man had systematically destroyed my sense of self while pretending to be my concerned, loving husband. But now, thanks to Grace's incredible courage and foresight, the truth was finally coming to light. Grace's second phone connected to the projection system, and I braced myself for whatever she was about to reveal. The screen filled with footage of David sitting across from Dr. Walsh in what appeared to be the doctor's office. The camera angle suggested Grace had hidden her phone behind some books on a shelf during one of my appointments. "The increased dosage is working exactly as planned," Dr. Walsh was saying, leaning back in his leather chair with the casual confidence of someone discussing the weather. "Lisa's cognitive function has decreased noticeably over the past month. She's questioning her own perceptions, having difficulty concentrating, and showing signs of memory fragmentation." David pulled out a thick envelope and slid it across the desk. 15,000, as agreed. "How much longer before we can move to phase 2? Dr. Walsh opened the envelope and quickly counted the cash inside. "Another 6 weeks should do it. By then, her condition will appear severe enough to justify involuntary psychiatric evaluation. I'll recommend a 72-hour hold for observation, which we can extend indefinitely if necessary. And you're confident the medication interactions won't cause permanent damage? The combination I'm giving her creates temporary cognitive impairment and mood instability. It's completely reversible once we stop the treatment. But while she's on it, she'll present as someone with severe depression and possible early dementia symptoms." I felt the blood drain from my face as I listened to these two men discuss destroying my mental health like they were planning a business merger. Dr. Walsh had been prescribing medications specifically to make me appear mentally ill, while David paid him handsomely for his participation in this elaborate fraud. The video cut to a different scene, showing David at his computer in our home office. The timestamp indicated this was recorded 3 months ago, late at night when Grace and I were asleep. David was researching various mental health conditions, taking notes on symptoms and progression timelines. Grace's voice provided narration over the footage. I found Daddy's notebook where he wrote down all the symptoms he wanted Dr. Walsh to create. He studied different mental illnesses so he could coach the doctor on what to put in Mommy's medical records. On screen, David was typing search terms like symptoms of bipolar disorder and early signs of dementia in women. He had pages of handwritten notes about medication, side effects, and how to create the appearance of mental instability without causing obvious physical harm. The next clip was even more disturbing. It showed David in our kitchen, carefully opening my daily medication containers and adding extra pills. But what made my stomach churn was the methodical way he documented everything in a small notebook, recording dates, dosages, and my behavioral responses. Day 43 of increased sertraline and added lorazepam, he wrote while speaking aloud, apparently for his own records. Lisa showed increased confusion during morning routine. Took her 15 minutes to remember how to program coffee maker. Excellent progress. I watched my own husband, celebrating my cognitive decline like a scientist, tracking a successful experiment. The man I'd shared my bed with for over 2 decades had been poisoning me systematically while taking detailed notes on how effectively he was destroying my mental faculties. The video shifted to show David meeting with Dr. Walsh in a coffee shop, both men looking around nervously before beginning their conversation. "I need you to schedule Lisa for more frequent sessions," David said. "The court will want to see an extensive treatment history when we file for custody modification. How many sessions are you thinking?" 3 times a week for the next 2 months. I want her medical file to be thick enough that no judge would question her need for intensive psychiatric intervention. Dr. Walsh nodded thoughtfully. "I'll document increasingly severe symptoms with each visit. Paranoid ideation, memory loss, inability to care for herself properly. By the time we're done, her file will read like a textbook case of someone who needs immediate institutionalization." "What about Grace? Will she be questioned about Lisa's behavior at home?" "I'll note that the patient's daughter has expressed concerns about her mother's stability. Child Protective Services will see that as corroboration of our professional assessment. I realized that David had been planning to use Grace's supposed concerns as evidence against me, never imagining that she was actually documenting his crimes. My brilliant daughter had been 3 steps ahead of both of them, while appearing to be an innocent bystander. The next scene showed David in a different location entirely, meeting with a man I didn't recognize. The meeting appeared to be in some kind of warehouse or storage facility, based on the concrete walls and fluorescent lighting. Carl Murphy, private investigator, the man introduced himself. You said you needed help documenting your wife's erratic behavior? Exactly. I need photographic evidence of Lisa acting unstable in public. Can you arrange situations that would make her appear mentally unbalanced to outside observers? Carl pulled out a tablet and began showing David photos and video clips. We can stage incidents where she appears to be talking to herself, having emotional outbursts, or behaving inappropriately in social situations. Our actors are trained to provoke specific responses while making it look completely natural. How much for a comprehensive package? $25,000 gets you a full month of documented incidents. Restaurant scenes, shopping mall interactions, workplace disruptions. By the time we're finished, you'll have enough evidence to convince any court that she's a danger to herself and your child. David handed over another envelope of cash. I want this wrapped up before the custody hearing. The more dramatic the evidence, the better. I was stunned by the elaborate nature of David's plan. He hadn't just been manipulating me at home, he'd been creating an entire fictional narrative of my supposed mental illness with the help of corrupt professionals and paid actors. Every aspect of my life had been weaponized against me. The video continued with more footage of David's criminal activities. He was shown breaking into my real estate office after hours, planting fake client complaint letters in my files. He met with our family accountant, Jennifer Hayes, bribing her to create false records, showing I'd been stealing from escrow accounts. One particularly devastating clip showed David coaching our daughter's school counselor, Mrs. Patricia Vance, on what to write in reports about Grace's supposed concerns regarding her mother's mental state. Grace is a very observant child, Mrs. Vance was saying. If she's noticed changes in her mother's behavior, that would be significant evidence for your case. She's mentioned several incidents to me, David lied smoothly. Episodes where Lisa became confused or agitated for no apparent reason. Grace has been scared to be alone with her mother during these times. I looked across the courtroom at Grace, who was watching the screen with tears streaming down her face. My heart broke realizing that she'd been forced to witness her father attempting to manipulate even her school counselor into providing false testimony against me. Judge Harrison called for a brief recess, during which Patricia Summers approached David with obvious panic in her voice. I could see them having an intense, whispered conversation, but couldn't make out the words. David's confident demeanor was cracking, replaced by the expression of a man watching his carefully constructed plans collapse around him. When court resumed, Grace was ready with even more evidence. As she prepared to connect her third device to the projection system, she turned to address the courtroom directly. Your Honor, what everyone has seen so far is just the beginning. My father didn't just try to make my mother sick. He was planning to take everything from her, including her life. The courtroom fell into complete silence as Grace's words sank in. Judge Harrison leaned forward with obvious concern. Young lady, these are very serious allegations. Are you prepared to support these claims with evidence? Grace nodded solemnly. Yes, sir. I have video proof of everything. As the next section of footage began playing, I realized that my 15-year-old daughter had been conducting her own investigation for months, gathering evidence that even seasoned law enforcement professionals would find impressive. Whatever she was about to reveal next would apparently show that David's plan had extended far beyond psychological manipulation and medical fraud. The man I'd loved and trusted for over 2 decades hadn't just been trying to steal my sanity and my child. According to Grace, he'd been planning something even worse, something that would ensure I could never threaten his carefully constructed narrative about my supposed mental illness. The screen filled with footage of David in our home office at 3 a.m, carefully forging my signature on multiple documents spread across his desk. The quality of the video was remarkably clear, suggesting Grace had hidden multiple cameras throughout the house to capture her father's nocturnal activities. Document after document, Grace's voice narrated softly. Property deeds, bank transfers, investment account changes. Daddy was signing Mommy's name to everything while she slept upstairs. I watched in shock as David practiced my signature repeatedly before applying it to official papers. He had stacks of documents that appeared to transfer ownership of our house, my real estate business, and several investment properties solely into his name. The methodical precision of his forgery was chilling to witness. The video cut to a daytime scene in a Bank of America branch, where David sat across from a banker I recognized as Thomas Rodriguez, someone I'd worked with for years on client transactions. The hidden camera captured their entire conversation with perfect audio clarity. "Mrs. Richardson's credit history needs some modifications," David was saying, sliding another cash-filled envelope across the desk. "Nothing dramatic, just enough inconsistencies to support our case that she's been making poor financial decisions due to her mental health issues." Thomas opened the envelope and quickly counted the bills. "What kind of modifications are we talking about?" "Late payments that don't actually exist, a few missed mortgage payments, maybe some evidence of unusual spending patterns. The goal is to make her appear financially irresponsible and incapable of managing money. I can backdate some entries in the system, create documentation showing erratic payment behavior over the past year. Will that be sufficient?" "Perfect. I need this completed before the custody hearing next month. The judge needs to see a pattern of financial instability that correlates with her psychological deterioration." I felt physically sick watching a banker I'd trusted for years agreeing to falsify my credit records for money. Thomas had helped me close dozens of real estate transactions, had congratulated me on my business success, had seemed like a genuine professional. Now he was conspiring to destroy my financial reputation as casually as discussing lunch plans. The next clip showed David in our bedroom, going through my jewelry box while I was at work. But he wasn't just stealing pieces. He was photographing everything first, creating an inventory of items he planned to sell without my knowledge. Grace's camera captured him removing my grandmother's pearl necklace, the diamond earrings he'd given me for our 10th anniversary, and several other pieces with significant sentimental value. "I documented everything Daddy stole," Grace explained to the courtroom. "He sold most of Mommy's jewelry online and put the money in accounts she didn't know about. When she noticed things missing, he told her she must have misplaced them because of her memory problems." The video showed David meeting with a pawn shop owner downtown, negotiating prices for my stolen jewelry. He was casual about it, even joking with the shop owner about how women have too much jewelry anyway. Watching my own husband selling pieces that represented our relationship milestones was heartbreaking beyond words. But the financial betrayal went much deeper. The next scene showed David in his brother Marcus's apartment, planning an elaborate scheme involving fake charitable donations. Marcus, whom I'd always considered a friend, was helping David create documentation showing that I'd donated large sums of our money to fraudulent charities during supposed manic episodes. "The key is making it look like she was in a hypomanic state when she made these donations," David was explaining to Marcus. "People with bipolar disorder often go on spending sprees during their elevated moods. We just need to create evidence that she gave away $50,000 to fake charities during one of her episodes." Marcus was designing fake charity websites and donation receipts that would appear in our financial records. They even created fake thank you letters from these non-existent organizations, complete with letterheads and official-looking signatures. "What if she denies making these donations?" Marcus asked. "That's the beauty of it. Denial is a symptom of her condition. The more she insists she didn't do these things, the more mentally unstable she appears to be." I realized that David had been systematically stealing our money while creating false evidence that I was the one giving it away due to mental illness. Every theft was designed to reinforce the narrative of my supposed psychological problems while enriching himself at my expense. The video continued with even more devastating evidence of David's fraud. Grace had recorded him accessing my business accounts and stealing client deposits, money that belonged to families trying to buy their first homes or elderly couples downsizing for retirement. He was stealing from innocent people while making it appear that I was the thief. One clip showed David meeting with our accountant, Jennifer Hayes, in her office downtown. Jennifer had been handling our taxes for 15 years and was someone I'd considered trustworthy and professional. "I need these business transactions to disappear from Lisa's records," David was saying, handing Jennifer a list of his thefts. "Make it look like she withdrew the money for personal use during her psychiatric episodes." "That's going to require some creative bookkeeping," Jennifer replied, studying the list. "We're talking about significant amounts here. I'll pay you $25,000 to make this problem disappear." Lisa's mental state gives us the perfect cover story for any financial irregularities. Jennifer nodded slowly. I can restructure the records to show personal withdrawals during the time periods you've specified. When the court reviews her business finances, it will appear that she's been using client funds for personal expenses. Watching Jennifer agree to help David frame me for embezzlement was devastating. This was a woman I'd worked with for over a decade, someone who knew how carefully I managed my business finances and how much I cared about my clients' trust. Now she was helping my husband destroy my professional reputation for money. The most shocking revelation came in the next clip, which showed David researching how to falsify evidence of an extramarital affair. He was studying ways to create fake hotel records, fabricated text messages, and staged photographs that would make it appear I was having a relationship with our neighbor, Kevin Martinez. Grace's footage captured David hiring an actress named Nancy Stevens to pose as my supposed lover. Nancy was instructed to dress like me and was photographed entering a hotel with Kevin, who had apparently been drugged or coerced into participating in this charade. The adultery angle gives me grounds for fault-based divorce, David explained to his private investigator Carl Murphy. Combined with her mental illness and financial irresponsibility, no judge will award her custody or significant assets. Carl showed David the fake photographs on his tablet. These look completely authentic. The timestamps show she was supposedly meeting this man during times when she claimed to be showing houses to clients. Perfect. I want her completely destroyed, financially and personally. When this is over, she shouldn't be able to get a job selling hot dogs, let alone real estate. The cruelty in David's voice as he planned my total destruction was unlike anything I'd ever heard from him. This wasn't just about divorce or custody. This was about systematically annihilating every aspect of my life and reputation. Judge Harrison paused the video and looked directly at David. Mr. Richardson, you're watching evidence of yourself committing multiple felonies. Do you wish to consult with your attorney about these proceedings? Patricia Summers was frantically whispering in David's ear, but he just sat there with a blank expression, as if he couldn't process how thoroughly his secrets had been exposed. Grace raised her hand to address the court. Your Honor, there's more evidence, but I need to tell you something important first. Judge Harrison nodded for her to continue. My father's attorney, Mrs. Summers, didn't know about most of this, but I have videos showing that Daddy was blackmailing her to make her help destroy Mommy's case. Patricia Summers went pale and slowly stood up. Your Honor, I request permission to withdraw as counsel for Mr. Richardson immediately. I've just learned information that creates an irreconcilable conflict of interest in this case. As Patricia began explaining her own victimization by David's manipulation, I realized that his web of corruption had ensnared even more people than I'd imagined. My daughter's investigation had uncovered not just financial fraud and medical conspiracy, but an entire network of coercion and blackmail that David had been operating while pretending to be my loving, concerned husband. The man I'd trusted with my life, my love, and my future had been systematically destroying everything I cared about while building a fortress of lies designed to steal my child, my freedom, and possibly my life itself. Patricia Summers stood before Judge Harrison, with her hands trembling as she spoke. Your Honor, I must disclose that Mr. Richardson has been blackmailing me for the past 3 months to ensure I would sabotage his wife's defense. The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. Patricia reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small recording device. I've been documenting our conversations as insurance, in case he tried to destroy my career if I didn't cooperate with his demands. She pressed play, and David's voice filled the courtroom with chilling clarity. Patricia, I have photographs of you and Judge Henley in a very compromising situation from last year's Bar Association conference. Unless you want those images sent to the state bar and your husband, you'll make sure Lisa's case falls apart completely. Patricia's recorded voice was barely audible. David, what you're asking me to do violates every ethical standard of legal practice. Ethics don't matter when your career and marriage are on the line. I need you to file motions that you know will be denied, miss critical deadlines, and fail to object to evidence that should be inadmissible. Make it look like incompetence, not sabotage. And if I refuse, then everyone will know about your affair with Judge Henley, including your husband Robert and your children. Your law practice will be ruined, and you'll face disciplinary action from the state bar. Your choice. Judge Harrison's face darkened as he processed this information. Miss Summers, why didn't you report this blackmail immediately? I was terrified, Your Honor. Mr. Richardson had evidence of a personal mistake I made, and he was using it to control my professional conduct. I've never experienced anything like this in 25 years of practice. Grace stepped forward again. Judge Harrison, I have video of Daddy meeting with lots of other lawyers and judges. He's been doing this to many people, not just Mrs. Summers. The screen filled with footage of David, in what appeared to be a private dining room at an upscale restaurant. Around the table sat several men I didn't recognize, all dressed in expensive suits and speaking in hushed conspiratorial tones. Gentlemen, welcome to our monthly coordination meeting, David was saying as he raised a glass of wine. Let's review our current cases and share strategies that have been effective. One of the men, identified by Grace's narration as William Barnes, a divorce consultant, began speaking. The psychological manipulation approach continues to be our most successful strategy. We've now helped 43 men gain full custody by systematically undermining their wives' mental health. The key is patience and documentation, added another man, apparently Dr. Richard Stone, a psychiatrist. Gradual medication adjustments combined with gaslighting techniques can make any woman appear unstable within 6 to 8 months. I felt nauseous listening to these men discuss destroying women's lives like they were comparing golf scores. This wasn't just David's personal vendetta against me. This was an organized network of professionals who specialized in helping abusive husbands steal custody and assets through calculated psychological torture. Our legal coordination has been particularly effective, said another participant, identified as attorney Marcus Webb. When we have judges and court clerks providing inside information about case timelines and procedures, we can time our manipulations perfectly. David nodded approvingly. The beauty of the system is that the more frantically these women try to defend themselves, the more unstable they appear to outside observers. Desperation looks like mental illness to people who aren't aware of what we're doing. The video cut to show David receiving what appeared to be a training manual from William Barnes. The document was titled Comprehensive Guide to Psychological Warfare in Family Court and contained detailed instructions on everything from medication tampering to financial fraud. Chapter 7 covers creating false medical records, Barnes was explaining. Chapter 12 details how to manipulate children into supporting your custody case. Chapter 15 provides templates for fabricating evidence of spouse's mental instability. Grace's footage showed David studying this manual like a textbook, taking notes in the margins and highlighting specific tactics. He had approached destroying my life with the same methodical preparation most people bring to planning a vacation. The next clip revealed the scope of corruption in our local family court system. David was meeting with Amanda Foster, a court clerk I'd seen during our preliminary hearings, in a coffee shop near the courthouse. Judge Harrison's calendar shows your case is scheduled for next Tuesday, Amanda was saying while David slid money across the table. I can make sure certain documents get misfiled so they're not available when your wife's attorney needs them. What about the psychological evaluation records? Can you delay those from reaching the judge's chambers? Already handled. Dr. Peterson's report recommending custody for your wife has been mysteriously lost in our filing system. It should remain missing until after your hearing concludes. I realized that even court personnel had been corrupted by David's money and influence. The entire system I'd trusted to protect my rights as a mother had been compromised by an underground network of men who specialized in stealing children from their mothers through systematic abuse and fraud. The video continued with more evidence of this conspiracy. Grace had recorded David meeting with other husbands who were using similar tactics against their wives. They shared strategies like comparing notes on successful business mergers, completely dehumanizing the women they were destroying. Jennifer's been committed to a psychiatric facility for indefinite observation, one man reported proudly. The judge agreed that her paranoid delusions about being drugged made her unfit for custody. My kids will never have to see their mentally ill mother again. Excellent work, David responded. What medication protocol did you use? Dr. Stone's recommended combination of haloperidol and lithium created perfect symptoms of psychosis within 6 weeks. Jennifer started hearing voices and seeing things that weren't there. The involuntary commitment hearing was a formality. I felt physically sick listening to these men celebrate driving women to psychiatric hospitals through deliberate poisoning. How many other wives and mothers had been destroyed by this network of predators disguised as concerned husbands and helpful professionals? Grace's investigation revealed that David had been part of this organization for over 2 years, long before he filed for divorce. He had been planning my destruction since Grace was 13 years old, studying techniques and building relationships with corrupt professionals who could help him steal my child and my life. The most chilling footage showed David meeting with orderlies from a private psychiatric facility called Serenity Hills. The men were discussing plans for my involuntary admission following my supposed mental breakdown during the custody hearing. Once the judge orders psychiatric evaluation, we'll be ready to transport Lisa within the hour, one of the orderlies was saying. Dr. Stone has prepared her admission paperwork, showing she's a danger to herself and others. How long can you keep her there? David asked. Indefinitely, with the right documentation. Dr. Stone will adjust her medications to ensure she remains confused and agitated. Most families stop visiting after a few months when the patient doesn't show improvement. And Grace? Your daughter will be told that her mother's condition has deteriorated beyond hope of recovery. Children usually accept this explanation and eventually stop asking about the hospitalized parent. The casual way these men discussed stealing my freedom and separating me from Grace forever was beyond evil. They had planned to drug me into genuine mental illness, imprison me in a psychiatric facility, and tell my daughter that her mother was too sick to ever come home. As this section of Grace's evidence concluded, Judge Harrison called for another recess. But this time, instead of hushed conversations, the courtroom erupted in angry voices as spectators processed the magnitude of corruption they'd witnessed. I looked at David, who was staring at the floor with the expression of someone watching his entire life collapse. He hadn't just been planning to divorce me, he'd been planning to erase me from existence while convincing our daughter that her mother had simply disappeared into madness. But as Grace prepared her final pieces of evidence, I realized that my brilliant, brave daughter had been several steps ahead of David's entire network. Whatever she was about to reveal next would apparently expose the full scope of his criminal enterprise and provide the evidence needed to bring justice, not just for me, but for all the women who had been destroyed by these monsters disguised as loving husbands and caring professionals. Just as Grace prepared to play the final segment of her evidence, the courtroom doors opened and several people in dark suits entered quietly. Judge Harrison nodded at them with obvious recognition, and I felt a shift in the atmosphere that suggested this moment had been carefully planned. Ladies and gentlemen, Judge Harrison announced, I need to inform you that this court has been conducting a joint investigation with federal law enforcement into allegations of organized corruption in family court proceedings. What you've witnessed today represents evidence gathered during a months-long undercover operation. Agent Sarah Collins stepped forward, displaying her FBI credentials. Mr. Richardson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, medical malpractice facilitation, witness tampering, and domestic terrorism. You have the right to remain silent. The courtroom exploded into chaos as David jumped to his feet, his face flushed with panic. This is impossible. This is a private family matter, not some federal case. Sir, when you organized a criminal enterprise that spans multiple states and involves federal crimes including mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to violate civil rights, it becomes very much our jurisdiction. Agent Collins replied calmly as other agents moved to surround David. Grace approached Judge Harrison's bench again, this time carrying a thick manila envelope. Your Honor, I need to give you this before they arrest him. Judge Harrison opened the envelope, and his expression grew grave as he examined the contents. After a few moments, he looked directly at David with unconcealed disgust. Mr. Richardson, the evidence in this envelope includes your handwritten plans to murder your wife and make it appear to be suicide. This court finds you to be an immediate danger to public safety. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. I felt my legs give way and had to grab the railing to keep from falling. David had been planning to kill me. Grace's voice was steady, but tears streamed down her face as she explained to the court. I found these papers hidden in Daddy's safe last month. He wrote out detailed plans about how to make Mommy's death look like she killed herself because of depression. He was going to wait until after she was committed to the psychiatric hospital, then arrange for her to die there and claim she couldn't handle being mentally ill. Agent Collins took the envelope from Judge Harrison and quickly reviewed its contents. These documents detail a specific plan to administer a lethal dose of psychiatric medications and arrange the scene to appear as deliberate overdose. Mr. Richardson researched suicide methods common among patients with your wife's supposed diagnosis. I couldn't breathe. The man who had held me when I cried, who had danced with me at our wedding, who had helped me bring our daughter into the world, had been planning to murder me and convince everyone that I'd taken my own life. Grace, Judge Harrison said gently. How did you discover your father's plans? I knew he was planning something worse than just taking Mommy away. He kept having secret meetings with those men from the psychiatric hospital, and I heard him talking about permanent solutions. So, I learned how to open his safe by watching him enter the combination when he thought I was asleep. And when did you contact law enforcement? Agent Collins stepped forward to answer. Grace called our domestic terrorism hotline 6 weeks ago. She discovered evidence of an organized criminal network targeting women and children through the family court system. We've been investigating this operation for months, but Grace's evidence provided the breakthrough we needed. I looked at my 15-year-old daughter with overwhelming pride and gratitude. While I'd been struggling just to survive David's psychological torture, Grace had been conducting a sophisticated investigation and working with federal agents to expose a criminal conspiracy. Your Honor, Agent Collins continued, David Richardson is a member of what we've identified as the Family First Network, a nationwide organization that helps abusive men gain custody of their children and steal marital assets through systematic psychological warfare. We've documented similar cases in 17 states. Dr. Walsh was led away in handcuffs, along with Thomas Rodriguez from the bank and Jennifer Hayes, our accountant. One by one, David's co-conspirators were arrested as Agent Collins explained the scope of their investigation. The network operates by identifying men going through divorces who are willing to pay substantial fees for guaranteed custody outcomes. They provide comprehensive services, including medical manipulation, financial fraud, legal corruption, and when necessary, elimination of the spouse. Elimination? Judge Harrison asked with obvious horror. We've identified 4 suspicious deaths of women who were fighting custody battles against network members. In each case, the women died of apparent suicide shortly before crucial court hearings, where they were expected to present evidence of abuse. I realized that David hadn't just been planning to steal my life. He'd been planning to end it. If Grace hadn't discovered his plot and contacted law enforcement, I would have been the 5th woman to mysteriously die during divorce proceedings. Grace's courage in documenting this criminal enterprise has helped us dismantle an organization responsible for destroying hundreds of families, Agent Collins said. Her evidence will be crucial in prosecuting not just her father, but the entire network of professionals who facilitate these crimes. Judge Harrison addressed Grace directly. Young lady, you've demonstrated extraordinary bravery and intelligence in protecting your mother and exposing these criminals. The court wants to ensure you feel safe and supported as we move forward. Grace nodded solemnly. I just want my mommy to be safe and healthy again. She's been so sick because of the things they did to her, but she's not really mentally ill. She just needs time to get the bad medicine out of her body. Dr. Margaret Chen, a court-appointed psychiatrist I'd never met before, approached the bench. Your Honor, we've been monitoring Mrs. Richardson's condition since Agent Collins contacted us 3 weeks ago. Blood tests confirm she's been receiving medications that would cause cognitive impairment, memory loss, and mood instability. With proper medical care, these effects should be completely reversible. I felt a wave of relief so powerful that I started crying. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't going crazy. I wasn't an unfit mother. Everything I'd been experiencing was the result of deliberate poisoning by people I'd trusted with my health and well-being. Mrs. Richardson, Judge Harrison said kindly, this court owes you a profound apology. The system failed to protect you from an elaborate criminal conspiracy, and you've suffered tremendously as a result. We're going to do everything in our power to help you recover and rebuild your life. Agent Collins approached me with a warm smile. Lisa, your daughter saved not just your life, but potentially dozens of other lives. The evidence she gathered has given us everything we need to prosecute this entire network and prevent them from targeting other families. As David was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at Grace with an expression of pure hatred. But my daughter stood tall and looked him directly in the eyes without fear. She had faced down a monster and won, protecting not just her mother but countless other women and children who might have become future victims. Judge Harrison banged his gavel and made his final pronouncement. All charges against Lisa Richardson are dismissed with prejudice. Full custody of Grace Richardson is awarded to her mother, with David Richardson having no visitation rights pending criminal proceedings. This court orders immediate restitution of all stolen assets, plus punitive damages. As the courtroom began to empty, Grace rushed to my side and I held her tighter than I'd ever held anyone in my life. My brilliant, brave daughter had not only saved my life, but had brought justice to women across the country who had been terrorized by David's network of predators. The nightmare was ending, but the healing was just beginning. 3 months after that horrific day in court, I'm sitting in our new kitchen, watching Grace do homework at the counter while autumn sunlight streams through windows that overlook the mountains of Colorado. We moved here to start fresh, far from the memories of Arizona, and close to my sister Rebecca, who has been our anchor during this incredible journey of healing and recovery. The legal aftermath unfolded with the precision of dominoes falling. David was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for domestic terrorism, conspiracy, medical fraud, and attempted murder. Dr. Raymond Walsh lost his medical license permanently and received 15 years for his role in the pharmaceutical manipulation scheme. Thomas Rodriguez at the bank got 10 years for financial fraud, and Jennifer Hayes received 8 years for conspiracy and embezzlement. The Family First Network was completely dismantled. Agent Collins later told me that Grace's evidence led to arrests in 17 states, with over 60 men and 40 corrupt professionals facing federal charges. Most importantly, 32 women who had been committed to psychiatric facilities under suspicious circumstances were re-evaluated, and 28 were found to have been misdiagnosed and medicated illegally. They're now free and reunited with their children. My health recovery was remarkably swift once the toxic medications left my system. Doctor? Chen explained that my cognitive symptoms, memory problems, and mood swings were entirely caused by the drug interactions David and Dr. Walsh had orchestrated. Within 6 weeks of stopping the illegitimate prescriptions, my mind was clearer than it had been in over a year. The woman who had built a successful real estate career was still there, just temporarily clouded by pharmaceutical sabotage. Grace received a commendation from the FBI for her investigative work and was invited to speak at a conference on domestic terrorism prevention. She's become a powerful advocate for children living in abusive households, helping them understand that documenting abuse isn't betraying family loyalty. It's protecting innocent people from dangerous predators. Our mother-daughter relationship has grown deeper than I ever imagined possible. Grace explained that she'd started recording David's behavior when she noticed how confused and sad I'd become after my appointments with Dr. Walsh. She said I used to be confident and strong, but I was slowly disappearing into fear and self-doubt. "I knew you weren't really sick, Mom," she told me one evening as we walked through our new neighborhood. "You were just being poisoned by people who were supposed to help you." I had to document everything so someone would believe us when we finally told the truth. The financial recovery exceeded my wildest expectations. The court ordered David to return all stolen assets, plus punitive damages for emotional trauma and lost income. His brother Marcus was forced to liquidate several properties to repay money they'd hidden through their fake charity scheme. The jewelry David sold was tracked down and recovered, including my grandmother's pearl necklace that had seemed lost forever. I reopened my real estate practice in Denver and quickly rebuilt my reputation. Word spread about what had happened in Arizona, and instead of damaging my credibility, it actually attracted clients who wanted to work with someone who had survived such an ordeal with grace and strength. Apparently, people trust agents who have proven they can handle adversity with integrity. The most meaningful aspect of our recovery has been connecting with other survivors of the Family First Network. I've met women from across the country who endured similar psychological warfare from husbands they'd trusted. We formed a support group that meets monthly, and we're working with advocacy organizations to change laws that make it easier for abusers to manipulate family court proceedings. Grace started attending a new high school in Denver, where she's thriving academically and socially. She joined the debate team and the school newspaper, using her communication skills to help classmates understand important social issues. Her courage in exposing David's crimes has inspired other students to speak up when they witness injustice in their own families or communities. I've learned to trust my own perceptions again, something I didn't realize I'd lost until it began returning. For months after the trial, I would second-guess simple decisions and ask others to confirm basic facts, habits developed during the time when David was systematically undermining my confidence. But gradually, the strong woman who had built a successful career and raised an amazing daughter re-emerged from the confusion he'd created. The deeper lesson from this nightmare goes beyond recognizing psychological abuse or understanding how corrupt people can manipulate systems designed to protect us. The most profound realization is about the incredible strength that exists within ordinary people when they're fighting for something truly important. I thought Grace was just my teenage daughter who needed protection and guidance. I didn't understand that she was actually a fierce warrior who was protecting me when I couldn't protect myself. She taught me that courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about being terrified and taking action anyway because the alternative is unacceptable. David's greatest miscalculation wasn't underestimating law enforcement or overestimating his ability to manipulate systems. His fatal error was believing that he could destroy the bond between a mother and daughter who truly loved each other. He never imagined that Grace would risk everything to save me, or that her love would give her the strength to stand up to adults who were supposed to be trustworthy but were actually predators. The experience also taught me about the importance of believing women and children when they report abuse, even when the abuse seems impossible or the abuser appears respectable. David was a successful attorney, a pillar of his community, someone everyone considered trustworthy and responsible. His public persona was so convincing that I sometimes wondered if I was imagining the subtle cruelty he showed me in private. But abuse doesn't always look like dramatic violence or obvious cruelty. Sometimes it looks like a concerned husband suggesting that his wife is becoming forgetful. Sometimes it looks like a caring father worried about his wife's mental health. The most dangerous abusers are often the ones who appear most helpful and sympathetic to outside observers. I want other women to know that if you feel like you're losing your mind in your relationship, if you're constantly questioning your own memory or judgment, if you feel like you're walking on eggshells trying not to upset your partner, trust your instincts. You're not imagining it. You're not being too sensitive. You're not going crazy. Someone who claims to love you should never systematically undermine your confidence or make you doubt your own perceptions. Most importantly, I want children to understand that protecting your parents from dangerous people isn't betrayal. It's love. Grace saved my life by being willing to document and report her father's crimes, even though she knew it would destroy our family as we knew it. Her bravery didn't just protect me. It protected dozens of other women and children who might have become future victims. As I watch Grace working on her homework, confident and focused and completely unafraid, I realized that surviving David's betrayal revealed something I never knew about both of us. We're stronger than we ever imagined, more resourceful than we ever needed to be, and more connected than any outside force could ever break. The pain was real, the terror was overwhelming, and the betrayal cut deeper than I thought was possible to survive. But on the other side of that darkness, we discovered that love and truth and justice are more powerful than elaborate conspiracies built on lies and manipulation. Grace and I didn't just survive David's attempt to destroy us. We emerged from that experience knowing exactly who we are and what we're capable of when we fight for each other. And that knowledge is something no one can ever take away from us. Now I need to ask you something important. Have you ever felt like someone was trying to make you doubt your own reality, your own memory, or your own judgment? Have you witnessed someone close to you becoming increasingly confused or forgetful in ways that seemed unusual or sudden? Sometimes the people who claim to love us most are actually the ones causing us the most harm, and recognizing that truth can literally save lives. Please take a moment to like this story if it resonated with you. Subscribe to hear more stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary strength, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that their instincts are valid and their experiences matter. Your engagement helps these important stories reach people who might desperately need to know they're not alone and they're not imagining things. Thank you for listening to Grace's and my journey, from manipulation to truth, from isolation to justice, and from fear to unshakable strength. I hope our story reminds you that no matter how dark things seem, there's always a path back to the light when we're willing to fight for what truly matters. May you always trust your inner voice, believe in your own worth, and never let anyone convince you that your reality isn't real.